The subject for today is transitional gaming, which specifically goes over the idea of game design that will be able to go from both tabletop to LARP environment and back and forth. The hurdles that you hit trying to design and utilize game systems to transition from tabletop to LARP, approaches that we're using, the new game lines that are coming out for that'll handle that specific issue, and also what we're planning on doing in technology going forward to be able to bridge that even further. My name is Michael, this is Ashley. Dystopia Rising, Eschaton Media. Primarily related to this, we are working with the Chronos Universal LARP system, which is a theatrical LARP system that is starting as a card-based system instead of being something that's applied to a specific intellectual property, and hopefully later on turning on into a technology that will be able to be applied against all games. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the hurdles and the design issues from going from tabletop to LARP. As I throw out terminology, things of that nature, if there's anything that I say that you don't know what I'm referring to, don't wait to the end, just chime up. There's a total of 6 of us in the room, so there's 7 camera person. So with that in mind, there's absolutely no reason why we can't make this more of a conversation instead of me monologuing for 2 hours. Because no one wants to hear me talk. No one but me wants to hear me talk for 2 hours. So, primary hurdles that we found with doing transitional gaming, tabletop to LARP, is first, base and core mechanics. When you're dealing with a tabletop game, oftentimes you're using a mechanical system that is not directly related to the environment of roleplay. What I mean by that is you're using dice, you're using cards, you're using whatever your mechanical resolution system is, which has little to nothing to do with the roleplay that is going on. Rolling a 20-sided die, a die pool, card flipping to have a numerical aspect. That is completely removed from the game itself. In LARP, for making things streamlined and as easily as used as possible, you want the role play to not be divided and broken down too much by the mechanics. There are some very simulation-heavy LARPs, which use a lot more in the way of mechanics, and there are LARPs that are much more free-form, are more focused on emotional interaction, social interaction than mechanical design. So the difficulty becomes, how do you stay true to a tabletop intellectual property and the feel of the game, which is created by a tabletop world, while transitioning over into a LARP environment? And then, more so, how do you take that tabletop environment, move it into a LARP, and then be able to go back from LARP into tabletop again without ruining everything? The first aspect you have to look at is your means of conflict resolution. In LARP, there's a handful of conflict resolution forms that are primarily used. Rock, paper, scissors, stopwatches to get a randomized number, card pulls, mediation, where 2 parties will just decide what it is that occurs, mechanical systems that involve physical contact, breaking things into theatrical and non-theatrical LARPs. All of these systems are dependent upon the player doing something. Now, some of those are more genre-breaking and role-play breaking than others. If you take, for example, stopwatches, cards, rock, paper, scissors, things of that nature, every time you're pulling out your character sheet to look at a number that is there or referencing to a randomizer, you're no longer role-playing, which defeats one of the primary focuses of LARP, which is to try and stay in character and have as much immersion as possible for the longest time possible. Now, tabletop, you don't have that issue because everything is in the mind's eye. Everything is narrative. Everything is being spoken. So your storyteller or your game organizer, whatever term you want to use for it, depending on what system you're using, saying, give me an intuition check, doesn't completely break the role play because you're not completely immersed into your character. Even when you're in those moments where you're role playing and talking the most, you are still oftentimes sitting at a table, have beers or sodas all over it, and you're still sitting there with your friends, half of which are on their iProducts. Now, to transition from tabletop to LARP, one of the first things you need to do is completely drop the vast majority of mechanics that are used in tabletop. Traditions that we've used so far, dice, poker chips with cards, randomizers of that nature, the majority of them just will not work with LARP in a flowing sense. And where the breakdown is that we've seen is at the moment of conflict resolution. Because when things are the most dramatic, and things are building up to the biggest crescendo point, your players, to determine success or failure, are now pulling back away from that role play moment to do conflict resolution. So that mechanical design from tabletop will not work transitioning into LARP unless you design a tabletop initially with the idea of it being able to flex back and forth. This means we now need to look at our randomizers and our conflict resolution status to determine what tools we are using and if those tools are usable to allow both full immersion gaming as well as the more simulation aspect of tabletop. Now, there are many tabletop games out there that use little to no mechanic at all, or use charts that you'll do predetermined stories. Those are easier to translate over to LARP as long as you're looking more at one-shot scenarios or small group scenarios. The more people that you involve into a larger scale environment, the more difficult it becomes because you have to have more staff to player interaction to ensure that things are going smoothly. When you're looking to larger games, or games that go over multiple rooms or over an entire hotel, you need to have a standalone mechanic that people can follow and abide by, which won't get in the way of roleplay. Now, what we came up with was going to be coming out next month. We had a successful Kickstarter. Was Chronos, where it is both a tabletop and a LARP system. And I'm going to be using Chronos as the example for how to do a tabletop to LARP system design so that I can physically point at mechanical choices that we made and why we made those decisions. So, you ready for the next one? All right. Chronos itself, we decided to completely get rid of dice. No tokens. It is a completely card-based system without a card pull randomizer. If you've done a lot of theatrical LARPs, oftentimes it's, I want to use this power. So to use this power, here's what my stats are on my sheet. I pull a randomized card. My opponent looks at their sheet. They pull a randomized card, and we compare. Even the most experienced LARPers at that moment are going to have a delay. What does my power do? All right, sorry, I don't have my cards out. All right, whose turn is it? Which causes people in a theatrical environment oftentimes to try and avoid any form of conflict resolution, especially combat. How many of you have actually done like theater LARP? Okay. Which ones have you done?
Many of them, Vampire, the Masquerade, and Mind's Eye Society, Cthulhu, many others.
Festival
Okay.
games.
How long would a 40-person mass combat take in those systems?
It varies based on the system. There have been entire games dedicated in a Vampire Masquerade for conflicts that long that should take a span in 10 seconds. It takes 4 or 5 hours.
The one that they do at Alcon has a really cool, easy card system where you basically just pull and it's like, and if you want to avoid combat, you just say 1, 2, 3, and you leave. So it's because it's Cthulhu though, it's a one shot like what you're talking
Right.
about. So it's like, it doesn't really matter what happens.
Yeah, exactly. So the largest issue that theatrical art has is, well, first, theatrical art has certain advantages over large-scale off LARPs. One, you don't have to rent a large space to be able to do a theatrical art. Two, you could get a group of friends together and do a theatrical art without having to produce enough revenue to be able to afford a large space, insurance, props, etc., etc., etc. Three, it's much easier to be able to do a large number of theatrical LARPs in like a convention setting, where you can go from room to room to room and have a different experience in each room. At the end of the day, be done with your LARPs, go drinking with your friends, have a great time. Now, we wanted to approach the conflict resolution issue and break it down into its sources. One, in standard theatrical LARPs to date, the character sheet and the mechanics for your powers are two different sources. Oftentimes, a character sheet will have, you have such and such power, or such and such ability, or such and such lore. But what those things do, if you don't know them off the top of your head, you then have to refer to a second book to be able to determine what they do. The same applies with looking at character sheets for what you have for expendable traits. Blood, willpower, sanity, whatever it is that the game is going to be using to determine what fuels your powers. You either need to have tokens or you have markings on your sheet. In combat LARPs, the larger scale of buffer ones, oftentimes they either need to use tags for marking off what skills you've used, or you have to update the back of your sheet every time you're using skills so you can keep track of what you're doing. And all these things break you out of immersion, which is the full purpose of LARP. So what we did is we completely got rid of dice. We completely got rid of character sheets. And what we went with instead was a design where your character is defined by cards. The cards make up the aspect of your character, and you're, instead of building a single character sheet, you're building a character deck.
So each card has a cost to it. So this is one of the beta types. You know, this card might cost 3 points. I have a 20-point character. I build a 20-point deck, and that's my character sheet.
And by doing it this way, we've been able to, and you can see here where the block of text is, it allows us a space to be able to say, here's the mechanic for the power you are using. So that every time that you're using a power, and you're using a skill, and you're using an effect, you literally have the mechanics for it directly in your hand. So we want to, one, take out the wolf. The idea is that once you know how to play the game, the basic mechanics, the basic rule set, you shouldn't have to look anything up ever again. So you no longer have a person going, do you have a copy of this book? I want to look up how this works. That makes it faster. No longer are you updating a character sheet because everything is existent on cards. That makes it faster. By using a card base, it is a smaller design where it can literally just sit in your pocket. That makes it faster. The last thing that we want to do is also remove the randomizers. But to go further into it, for character design,
Wyrd video next.
yeah, I want to bring up the actual video from the Kickstarter.
So we did this project was done as a Kickstarter. It closed in November, I think. It'll be out next month. We've done 4 videos so far. I don't know if anybody has seen the Kickstarter from it. Okay, so you might have seen these. I don't know if you've watched the videos.
Yeah, I saw the system there.
If the audio is too quiet because we are just going from my speakers, just feel free to come forward so you can hear it.
Yeah, requirement. Oh.
Hello, and welcome to the Chronos Universal.
Can you hear it at all? Let's do. You got it? I'll just put the mic right in front of it, out of the screen. Will it reach all the way over there? Okay. we were just gonna do it as like, we were just gonna present, and I realized that doing it like this would be way better, so. Let's see.
Check.
It's coming from behind the,
And up to one red border mark. All you must.
It's behind it.
You must be sure that you have the required skills or requirements to utilize the red border card. For example, the administrator card has a perception skill.
Can the three of you hear it? Yeah. No, why don't we not bother with part of that? You can just continue. And so why don't we just start that?
Yes, turn over.
How do I,
So here's
Just pause it.
our friendly private.
Yeah,
friendly
yeah.
invest-
no.
Gaming and crime scene. Frankie spots something on the keyboard area in the kitchen, and the game organizer decides that Frankie needs to be there.
There we go.
Hello, and welcome to the Chronos Universal art system. We've shown you the basics of building a character. Today, we will show you how assembling a challenge hand works in basic conflict resolution. The Chronos Universal art system is designed for fast-paced and simple conflict resolution. Every round, each player is responsible for assembling a simple challenge hand utilizing one black bordered core card, one blue bordered card, and up to one red bordered card. While you must always use a blue bordered card, you must be sure that you have the required skills or requirements to utilize the red bordered card. For example, the administrator card has a perception skill, which will allow a character to utilize the arcade, gear, antique, and super detail of the card. So here we have our friendly private eye, Frankie, investigating a crime scene. Frankie spots something out of the ordinary in the kitchen, and the game organizer decides that Frankie needs to meet a difficult, re-challenge to figure out what's wrong. Frankie has assembled a basic challenge hand, the core hero card, the administrator specialty card, and the arcade computer item card. We now compare the challenge hands. The game organizer has set an acumen of 3 for the challenge. Frankie has a 2, a 2, and a 2, for a total of 6. With some clever use of tools and skills, Frankie notices that something had been stashed behind the refrigerator and sensed it from work for a good. How does this work when facing off against an antagonist or another character? Check back in next time when we will explain the combat round, character versus character combat.
We've done each one of these videos for the updates.
Now, right there is the entire mechanical design for how to do conflict resolution for the entire system. Everything boils down to core character, the different professions, skill sets you have, and equipment or powers that you are using. In doing it this way, it makes it so that you can divide the deck up into what you are primarily using and have that as your quick reference. That way, if you're going to be doing whatever supernatural power in whatever game that you're doing, the only thing you're swapping out most of the time is your last card.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So how did you know that you could use the telescope?
Uh,
Because it looked like there was a list of different things on it.
Basically, you have instead of doing individual items like a single card that is a telescope,
Yeah.
we do gear sets. A spy would have access to this sort of gear.
Got it.
Or in this example, the antique equipment, we would have access to this sort of adventurous gear.
And the player decides that I'm going to use one from the kit. Right?
Exactly. It makes it so you don't have to have individual cards for every single toothpick, every single item.
But is there a way to know in the scenario what is necessary to?
All they do is all those are based on basic acumen. So in other words, everything you will find on that list are all investigation tools. So if you were going to use a microscope or you're going to use a telescope or you're going to use any of the equipment on there, you can just look at the card and go, doing an investigation in a scene, I'm going to use the fingerprint dusting tool to see if I find anything. And then that just translates to the number in the top. You go, using the fingerprint dusting tool, I've got a 10. Well, with that, you are able to find and fill in the blank. And that goes back and forth from both the LARP and the tabletop. Now, these are all stagnant numbers. These are, while you're changing out cards in your deck, it doesn't add a randomizer. We do have a randomizer later, but this is one of the techniques that we decided to go very different from what a lot of LARPs and tabletops are doing, and taking more from the collectible card games category. Basically, when you are getting your fuel, your expendable resource, you are getting what we have in a system known as an ether card. That ether card has a number on it that is a variable, and allows you to replace one of your cards with that variable. So, for short periods of time, you can have a boost that goes above and beyond, but it becomes tactical instead of just being randomized on every single combat. Now, as the cards are being used, we've also done demos with it where we were trying to see how fast people could go with the game. Going back to that example that we had, or I mentioned earlier about the 40-person, we actually had people who had played the game once at one of our demo stuff we did, and we actually did a recording of it. 40 people, different powers from different game lines, different equipment to represent different types. They had not seen the cards before, and did a 40-person open, last person standing free-fall, which took 7 minutes to complete. Because what we did, instead of going turn-based, is we went time-based, hence the name Chronos. Next one. Now, conflict is supposed to be one of the moments in-game that is the most dramatic. However, in a lot of theatrical LARPs, it ends up becoming a thing you actively avoid because it bogs down the role play. So we decided to go with a conflict system with character versus character conflict that makes it so that you don't need to have a storyteller adjudicating at all times. That it is fast-paced, and it is almost at the same speed as a buffer LARP. You just want to bring up the conflict resolution, how you actually determine the success of a failure.
Welcome to the Chronos Universal Life System. In this entry, we will talk about combat resolutions between characters. Here we have a basic three-part challenge hand. Our familiar Blackfoot, Frankie, has crossed paths with Quinn, a paranormal item and positions expert. It seems the two of them have a misunderstanding and it's come to blows. Frankie is no stranger to a street fight and is ready to make a standard action attack against Quinn, presenting 2, 3, and 2, for a total offensive roll of 7. Quinn, not really a fisticuffs type, presents 2, 3, and 1 for a defensive dexterity of 6. Frankie lands the blow, and thanks to being a street fighter, deals 3 damage to Quinn. Quinn is left with 2 health, and needs to think fast if there is any hope of getting out of the scrap with one piece. Quinn's counterattack, like all actions in a single Chronos time combat round, is simultaneous to the attack. Quinn chooses to perform an attack for effect in the hopes of knocking Frankie prone. Quinn presents a brawn attack of 0, 2, and 2 for a total of 4. Frankie presents a defensive dexterity of 2, 2, and 1 for a total of 5. Frankie is just too quick for Quinn to take down. It looks like time for Quinn to make good on a hasty retreat, call in some friends, or hope changing up equipment next round makes a difference. So there you have it, a quick and easy combat round between 2 characters. Check back next time when we'll be discussing the Chrono System's special sense, ether cards.
It's the first time I've realized he refers to it as special home sauce.
Yeah.
Now, for design, the reason why we went with this approach is Even if you're doing tabletop or LARP, it gives a very simple visual cue about what's an attack and what's a defense. If you are initiating any action, character versus character, just attempting to do any sort of conflict resolution, climbing a wall, anything, your statistics go across the top, which allows you to stack the cards as you see on the left-hand side. If you're defending, protecting, preventing, it goes along the left-hand side of the card, as you see on the top there, thereby giving you the ability to have aggressive and defensive stats. Now, the entire explanation of how that combat scene would happen, even given the narrative, was still faster than a lot of theatrical LARPs have conflict resolution. When you get to the point where you know how your system works and what you have in your hand, you would literally just be saying, and as you are role-playing, punch 5, defense 6. It ends up becoming something that's part of a fluidic, slow role-play instead of something that breaks the role-play. The goal is to be able to keep people in character as conflict resolution is happening. One of my personal pet peeves when ever going to theatrical LARP is when you have the most dramatic moments that require conflict resolution, people completely ditching their character to be able to do the conflict resolution. So with this as a design idea, we want to be able to make it so that you could easily continue your role play, continue your movements, do slow motion conflict resolution, and have the same reliability and the same mechanics as you would in a standard theatrical LARP. Now, in a tabletop scenario, the same applies. Because they are timed rounds, you now have a table where everyone at the table has to say what they're doing, has to act, has to be paying attention. In tabletop, one of my pet peeves is when a round is going off or conflict happens, or there's a scene going on with one person, everyone bringing out their iPhones, bringing out their iPads, and completely not paying attention. As a storyteller, I often find myself having to repeat myself 2 to 3 times in those scenarios, and then not playing with those people anymore. So, by making it a timed scenario where people are dependent on what is going on in the situation and being actively aware, they become more involved in the scenario that's going on, and it removes that degree of my turn, your turn, what's going on again, that makes it so that you don't want those long grind sests. Now, you bring up the next one.
And how frequently do you get to choose the cards and stuff like that?
Each turn, which we suggest people start with 1-minute rounds. That's just to get people accustomed to it. But after the first time they were playing, there's our demo teams said they could do 30-second, 10-second rounds.
I think we dropped it down to 15 seconds on that first time. By the time we ended up doing the last stuff, everybody felt comfortable enough. And I think that could even be faster. Eventually you'll know your deck. You know what oh, I always use these cards for this, I always use these cards for this, and so.
That can be considered.
Exactly. And then on top of it, it allows you to determine the experience level of the room. If you're playing with the same gaming group who knows the system inside and out, you can easily 5-second rounds.
It seems to me like if you're a combat character and if it's a LARP, is it going to be PvP based or PvE based?
No, it is both. In PvE, these are the same cards that the storyteller is going to be using to represent NPCs. And there's also antagonist cards for things such as creatures, for things such as outworld threats. One of the system design things that we use is called the storytelling table. Yes?
What does the E mean in PvE?
What is it?
Player versus player and player versus environment.
Wonderful. Okay.
The storyteller's table is information and role events that are going on that all your character has to do, depending on what game style you're playing, is go take time to check to see what's going on. In other words, there are riots going on in the area. There's fire falling from the sky. Whatever it is that's going on in the world. Those are the tools that we provide in the storytelling deck. But on top of it, all of the player-driven characters are provided the same way.
And also So this is a mechanic system that you could port into anything, and we'll get into it a little bit more in a bit, but, you know, I could do away with my character sheet at DR and make a deck for my character. I could do away with my character sheet and dice in D&D and you know, and use this deck. So PvP versus PvE will be, you know, is based on what you're playing Chronos with or in.
I was just thinking, you know, just thinking about trolls and larks. If you have someone who has a bunch of combat stats and knows that they're always going to be throwing 10s or whatever, and this other person's always going to be, you know, defending 5s, no matter what their gear is, because that's just their, you
But
know.
they're not. This actually brings right into the next thing, which is our randomizers.
Hello, and welcome to the Chronos Universal Art System. Today, we are going to show you how the mysterious X factor of the Chronos multiverse works. Aether. As we've shown you before, every character has a focus trait, which defines how much Aether they can hold at any given time. When a character enters play, they typically will not have Aether already, but must utilize a prompt within the gameplay space to randomly draw up to their focus limit a number of Aether cards they can then carry with them during play. As the game progresses, the players will use their Aether cards to boost various abilities, activate special powers, and ultimately deplete their rule, leaving them with less abilities. As the game progresses, they need to be careful, because they can only tap the clock so many times before they can no longer draw you the card. So here we have Wyrd, a rebel fighting to defend the Earth from meddlesome outside forces. Wyrd knows enough about Aether to use it, and is busy hunting down a corrupt ATM enforcer who stole a valuable artifact. Wyrd has just one chance to keep the enforcer from escaping. Using the Deadeye shot artifact, Wyrd spends an Aether to activate its special ability, using the pistol from the Criminal Gear card to make an attack for effect combat action and force the enforcer to take cover and stop the win. Now let's say the artifact has been recovered, and Wyrd is now the proud wielder of Pyrokinetics, a school of metaphysical abilities and otherworldly power. To conjure this effect, Wyrd combines an Aether with the power to create a challenge hand. With a flash of heat and a singeing of hair, Wyrd has just successfully invoked a pyroblast from the Aether. So as you can see, Aether is a useful resource that allows characters to tweak the game at their pace, unleashing new special abilities or boosting existing defenses and attacks, but one that players need to carefully manage to make sure they maintain their advantage in a world where everyone might just have some Aether up their sleeve.
Now, bringing up the idea of the person who's just looking to be I've min-maxed my cards to be combat heavy. I have all the combat cards in the world. I'm going after a role-play focused character who all of their cards are defined for role-play centric mechanics. Aether is a randomizer. Design tree roughly mimicking a tarot deck that follows 4 suits and also is applied to 4 elements. That randomizer, 1 to 12, is a number that you get on your Aether card when you are getting your resources in the beginning. To apply it to specific games, if it was a magic-related game, and you have to get your magic from people who believe in fairies and have teacups, you go to where people believe in fairies and have teacups, and you get to draw your Aether card. In one of our games that's coming out, Devil Days, it's based on reaping souls. So when you are reaping a soul, you get an Aether card. That is also your randomizer. So you have a handful of numbers that you can apply as the game is going on. That combat-focused person who decides they just want to continuously go into combat has to keep in their mind that even the person who's playing a socially based character, if it is their moment where they feel very threatened and they want to get the hell out of Dodge, they can burn an Aether card to replace one of their normal stats with this higher augmented stat. It is always, it adds that variable to it, but it's a variable that's determined towards the beginning of game instead of being calculated at the time of conflict resolution.
So you know already, worst case scenario, if I get attacked, I can change a stat to 12.
Exactly, if you pull the teacher.
But only a few times. Whereas
Correct.
that guy could probably, or gal, could continually attack because they have base stats that are.
They have base stats. If your base stats average between 1 to 5, and again, this varies depending on what world you're playing. If your base stats vary on 1 to 5, and let's say you spent all of your XP to get, I punch things for 5, I've got a skill in punching things for 5, and
I've got these punching gloves.
and I have these punching gloves for 5, and it gives you 15. The person who's a socialite goes, wow, I can run away for 2. I've got shoes that get me away for 2, and I'm going to burn a 12. Now, the person who's attacking, sure, they can burn an ether as well, but it's a limited resource. They're only going to be able to do that once or twice. And in a environment where a role-play game is more social than physical combat, if a person decides to just randomly start attacking people, very quickly they're going to be outnumbered. Even socialite-based characters against a single combatant character, more times than not, numbers win. So what we wanted to do was make it so you still have that randomizer aspect, which goes into our game balance, but instead of having the randomization moment being at the time of conflict resolution, doing it much earlier on. That way you're not breaking out stopwatches, rock, paper, scissors, 1d10, dancing around a circle with hands in the air, whatever it is you're doing for your conflict resolution. So that that moment of resolution goes by faster. So you get back into the flow, back into the character quicker.
So when you're going to get your ether, you don't know what you're going to draw. You speak to
Exactly.
I just know I'm gonna draw 4 ether cards, they could all be 1s, they could all be 12s, they could be, 4, 7, and 8, and 2.
And is there a limited amount of ether per?
Depends on the game world you're playing. That's one of the key things that we're putting in there. This is a design system where we want to be able to go, here's the core mechanics, so that no matter what intellectual property you want to play, you can use this as a base and then decide there's only 10 ether pulls, or in an instance where it's a lot of magic, a lot of supernatural going on, or a lot of willpower, I can pull as many times as I like. That is what we call scheme. Is a scheme-specific decision. Basically, the way it works is Chronos is the mechanic under all of it, and then there's schemes on top of it. Schemes are intellectual properties, but there also could be generic genres. In other words, here is the Victorian pack. Here is the primitive Dark Ages pack. Here's the sci-fi pack. Here's magic pack. Here's your high technology espionage pack. And as a game designer, what you would be doing is going, I want to run a hermetic magic espionage game. I will take this pack, and I choose this as my font limitation. Or you go with one of the pre-made worlds that you can get with it, and go, I want to play X Arcana. X Arcana has a limitation in font, a really severe limitation. Or I want to play Dreamless, which is a completely different genre that's more modern day fantasy, where they're attempting to reclaim dreams from a world of the dying. Every time that you want to claim from the font, you have to do in-character actions to earn it. Font is just the mechanic which allows you to recover your resource, whatever that resource is. The reason why we go with ether is sort of universal through all of them, whether you want it to be blood points, willpower, rage, mystical powers, whatever it is you want to be using. How much battery power you have for your cybernetic implants. So that actually brings up what we're doing with design-wise by doing power packs, genres, and schemes. And part of what we're doing with it is we want to be able to, by designing it this way, we're releasing tools that don't have the world attached to the mechanics, so that you have a universal mechanic that you can use regardless of what you feel like running this week. Examples, DexCon, we're going to be doing a Pacific Rim LARP. A Pacific Rim LARP is being run by Sean Jaffe. He's going to be using our Chronos system to represent the vast majority of it. There is a Defense Against the Dark Arts Harry Potter inspired one, using the same system. And then we're actually running some of our in-house games, like Ex Arcana and Devil Days. These are actually some of the worlds that we're going to be releasing, just to sort of show from design aspect, what it will let us do. Ex Arcana is a hermetic-based magic that's been running games.
Been running in different versions for 5 or 6 years now. The Japanese been running it.
The idea behind it is that magic got sealed away, and it has now been reawakened. So there are those who use, in the war of magic, very high-rote hermetic magic, and then there's those who are the gutter snipes, who are sort of cobbling things together, but are better with modern-day technology. It is very bell-booking candle, very high hermeticism, and this is just the mechanics that are underneath it. Nudorado was written by Shoshana and Josh Harrison. It is a 1920s noir neo-shamanism game where effectively spirit animals have beat through a rift and bled into people in a noir steampunk-esque, more diesel punk than steampunk setting. And the idea by showing these, the next one, thank you. Dreamless, modern day fantasy. The design of this game is taking a reimagination of goblins who came from a world where all these power sources are being pulled from, and they literally jump from game to game to game trying to reclaim their power sources. Devil Days is a 1950s inspired demonic investment game with the idea that everything they said about rock and roll in the 50s was right.
Nice.
Now, all of these use the same system. They use the same mechanical design, they use the same tabletop to learn to transition over, but each of them has their own unique nuances that are then added on top of it. But because they all use the same system, you can then, as a storyteller, choose to do a hybrid. All right, I like the idea of spirit investment and neo-shamanism, but I want to put it in a 1950s world with demons in it. All right, well, I just take the cards from this game and the cards from this game, and I let my players know what cards that they can build their deck from. I like the idea of a demon-inspired game, but I want more of a high fantasy touch to it. All right, I'm going to take the deck from Devil Days and Dreamless. I want to do a game where we're traveling from world to world to world, and anything goes. I can literally just open up the floodgates to any and all forms of magic, demonism, high esoteric, plus anything that's in the generic decks. And all of these mechanically do identical thing in tabletop and LARP. By designing it this way, it makes it so that you're not attempting to do transition steps. Even with our own product lines that we've released in the past, like Dystopia Rising, mechanically there are things that we want to do with the tabletop. Physically, you can't do in the LARP. So we had to design two completely different mechanical designs that share the same world and intellectual property. We ran into the same thing with Project Paradigm. We released Project Paradigm and the tabletop mechanics were fantastic for it, but then we realized we could never release it as a LARP. And with our roots being so heavily grounded in LARP, we wanted to be able to do something that transitions between the two at all times. So with the project that's coming up, we pulled a lot of people together that we work with on other projects. Since we mentioned some of their projects, it's only fair to put their names up there, as well as projects that we've collectively have worked on in the past for reference. This has sort of been a combination of what we've learned for doing transitional systems across a number of different companies and a number of different projects we've worked on. What questions do you have about transitional systems, about hurdles that you personally ran into in system design, where you would like to see things go? I mean, I know there's 5 of us here and a camera person.
I'm not really a game designer, but one thing I've noticed about the difference between not just Nordic art, but like a lot of the Scandinavian games that are sort of like adjacent to the freeform scene, which are sort of tabletop or hybrid kind of games. Again, most of those are one-shots, but some of them could translate to a campaign style game. They just don't really have mechanics anymore. So I'm wondering, like, but the problem is a lot of Americans expect mechanics in their games. Like they're like, well, this game doesn't have anything to it. If I don't have a system that I can master.
How do I beat someone else?
Yeah, like the, bubble cops and robbers thing. Like, how do I know, which wins? Yeah. So I'm just wondering to what degree mechanics are necessary for them to play.
Anything outside of a smaller scope game, without a doubt. Unless you, in particular, if you're opening your game up to the public instead of being people that you actively know.
Mm-hmm.
If I know 20 people in a room, I don't need a game system.
Right.
We can just
Right.
play.
Well, that's what we've been doing.
Right.
We've been playing D&D, but we don't actually,
Right.
we just freeform it.
If you know the people who are in the room,
Yeah.
then it is easy to be able to go, all right, today we're going to do a 1950s alien encounter and go. Game systems are primarily designed with the lowest common denominator in mind. You want to be able to give enough of a system so that the people who have to rely on it to be able to be part of the mechanical role play have that safety net to go to, while making sure that it is fluid and in the background enough that the people who don't need it so that they can role play can just role play. In particular, it's when those two worlds meet when you need it the most.
Right.
Because you end up with Group A, which is, combat is ruining my role play, and then you have Group B that goes, well, I love the system, I gain these powers, I want to use these powers.
Or I don't know what to do if I don't have a system.
Right.
I mean, there are players that are like
Yeah.
that. That's what they think the game is, so they actually don't really understand role playing that well.
Or to them, that is what the game is.
Exactly, that's what I mean,
It's
yeah.
their.
And that's totally valid,
Yeah.
that's their style. It's interesting you brought that up, because I was just reading an article about educational art, and one of the arguments that the writer was making was that, we're trying to encourage people to get into role, and all that's great, but, since you do have a group of students that you don't know where they're at, having goals and having some sort of system allows them an entryway into the game. That if they can't get super into role, maybe they're not very good at it, or maybe they just don't understand it, they at least have that.
Mechanic to go back to,
Right,
whatever the mechanic is.
And in a lot of cases, a lot of the games have plenty of mechanics for combat. And if I take a system where all the mechanics for combat are there, and that's just what the mechanics are for, then if Michael is better at social interactions than I am, then there's nothing I can do to ever win against him, because we're we're playing characters who are not ourselves, but I am limited to simply my skills, while he can augment his social skills with an endless array of combat. And so if you're gonna play, you know, there are people who need mechanics for all aspects of game, because we allow, this is something we found a lot in a lot of games, plenty of things to do to make me a better fighter, but nothing to do to put me on an even playing field with somebody who's super smart.
Better at social interaction, or better at political
Yeah.
maneuvering.
And so while I'm playing a character, I'm still being limited, while this other person is being allowed to be better at the thing they can't actually be better at.
So system-wise, that allows you a mechanical definition for where a person's own shortcomings come into play. A person can only ever be as smart as they are smart. A person can only be as socially adept as they're capable of portraying. The mechanical system is sort of a crutch to allow a person to go above and beyond that. A lot of times we don't have an issue thinking about that in the physical combat sense, because we go, of course, who doesn't want to be able to throw a truck around? And no one can throw a truck around, so we have powers and skills for that combat aspect. But the same also applies to physical and social interactions as well.
Puzzles, swaying people's opinions.
And the other question I had with regards to that is, does the system include like telepathy and mind control type stuff?
Some of the games do.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we've done is for our generic power sets, it breaks down into tactile and physical powers, social augmentation, and mental manipulation powers for different scope. And powers is a general term. It could be anything from psychic ability all the way through, being able to control someone's mind, depending on what cards and which branches you're using of it. It allows for a person who is playing a social character to make a card that is social and have social-oriented strengths, so that they're on the same ground as the person who's throwing trucks, as long as they're allowed to talk. Any other questions?
I'm still thinking on foot, it's really interesting. So I'm thinking about how we can, digitise it. Let's talk about it.
We are planning, the first step is putting the decks together, is making the game exist, and then past that, we have plans to make it digital. And so you can have, my outside plan is to have, an app or program where I can sign into the game that I've gone to. I sign in, the DM it comes up, these are the cards that are allowed. I construct my deck right there in the app, and then when Michael and I have a conflict we need to resolve, I just pull up, I want, these 3 cards, and we, it resolves it right there, it tracks everything.
That'd be very cool.
It'd be very cool, and I think that it would be fair, because it's, we got a bunch of cards, and, nobody wants to slow down and think, what do you really have? But if you have like an app that just says, I have 10,
Yeah.
we're done, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's all part of it.
Even past that, just I pick these cards, I'm gonna fight with Michael picks these cards, yes, I'm gonna fight with Ashley, conflict, yep, no, I'm gonna switch that out for the next round, okay, and we're done.
But while that's going on, part of the design of the system is slow motion combat. So you've done your number crunching, but as the conflict is going on, you're in slow motion movement. The reason for this is, one, keeps you actively, I don't know how many times on the LARP I've had to say, all right, well, you're not really standing there, then where are you really standing? Because combat is broken down and people are no longer role playing.
Right.
A more accurate simulation of this would be, we're fighting? Okay. Yes, I'm fighting Michael. These 3 cards. 7 to hit you.
8 to get out of the way.
He always wins in these things.
Yep.
Okay. 3 to hit you.
1 to get out of the way.
Or as involved as you want to get.
Thereby, it keeps you in character much more than you would be if you're just breaking up sheets and comparing numbers. Because at that point, that's what we do in tabletop.
And I think that's legit. That was 2 rounds.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Without me defending.
Sure.
I'll punch you later.
So is it?
I'm thinking a lot about this, because one of the things scholarly wise we're trying to figure out is what immersion is, which is sort of like question.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about immersion, right now we're kind of talking about immersion into the story, immersion into the character. I do think combat statistics and everything are a type of immersion. It's like using two different parts of the brain. So like when we're playing D&D and we're in the middle of a scene, and then we have to break down to like do, miniatures and figure out where we are.
No, we pull up the battle map.
It's like going right, it's almost like right brain to left brain. It's like a different, it's still, you're immersed, but you're immersed in a totally different simulation than you were a second ago.
Yeah.
So
It's almost like two different types of games.
right, it's like a mini game within a game almost, yeah. And, for some people, that is the game, like you were saying, but for other people, like for me, it's very jarring, especially if I have to do math. I hate having to do math in games because it's difficult for me. It's very easy for me to be in character if I have to start thinking about, how many numbers and blah, blah, then that's really frustrating. So games that make it more simple, like, really are appealing to me, where I don't have to learn like a lot of system.
Well, that's also part of the design of it. We want to make it that if you could take three numbers and add them together,
Right.
you've got it. And you don't have to memorize system because it's on the card.
And if you're used to it, what
If you're
to
used to it, you know it, and if it's a new power, you can just literally go, okay, that's what it does. Instead of having to go, why is there no index in this book? Where is it? Really what we're trying to do is bridge that mechanical gap that exists in both LARPing and tabletop to make it so that conflict resolution can be a part of roleplay, while still offering enough of a mechanic that it gives a distinct, here is your result.
I think also with having it as an app, people are used to carrying the phone around, so, that wouldn't be as difficult as, I'm imagining cards would get frustrating because if they all, like.
Well, you're also dealing with like 80 cards.
Sure.
Yeah, character decks are not like 60 cards.
They're not, you're not going to carry around 52 cards, or, maybe if you're playing a very long campaign, your characters really get up to that point, but.
Even at that point, I think we've figured out by XP scale, assuming you do things by the general rule, you end up at about 15 cards at 8 years, assuming you play every single month twice. So that gets you to the point where it's like, all right, your core character card doesn't change. You can add professions, and then you can add powers and equipment. So at least one of those cards in most games, Double Days is the exception, one of the exceptions for it because it involves demonic transformation and things of that nature. That core card is a card. So you're not flipping through those. More times than not, you only have between 1 and 3 professions. So you already know 2 of those cards.
I just have a horrible habit of leaving my character sheet places and leaving stuff, especially if I'm LARPing. And I don't usually have pockets, but I think like if I had like a phone, that's something you're used to carrying around.
Yep.
I have a friend who's working on a system called Planetfall, where basically all the items in the game will have like a code.
That's scalable.
And then you'll bring around a tablet, and like if you see something, you'll like scan it, and then it comes up with information, like the computer is telling you the information.
In one of our other courses, the talks we did with technology, that was one of the things that we brought up. Being able to use those, being able to use RF tags, being able to use scannable phone systems for equipment. A lot of it is dependent on the scale of the game you're doing, though, of course. Anything else?
I think it's a very interesting system. I think it lends well to a sort of fast and loose, like, you can do it with pretty much anything. I like that. That's very useful. You can apply that to anything. Well, I want my D&D game to run off this card system.
Yeah.
You can even, once you understand enough about the system, I think it would probably be very useful to send out like a template, like, make your own cards. There you go.
That
We've
is.
talked about it.
We've talked about that as well.
I think that in and of itself would probably be a pretty good product. because people could just be like, okay, you know what, I want to make a LARP.
Mhm.
And now I've got this template, and now I know the basics of how to make things fair, or, you know,
How to balance.
how to, yeah, exactly, how to properly balance the stuff. Okay, cool, we're gonna make a We're All Dogs LARP.
Yep.
I am a golden retriever, that's my core one, and I am a good dog. That's my second one, and I have a bow. That's my third one, and Aether is how much your master loves you.
Yep.
Like, done. I made a LARP. I just made a We Are Dogs LARP.
Yep. That is, setting up the templates for people to be able to do customize is something that we had not only talked about, but we're planning on putting in. We didn't know how we would be able to incorporate that into the app part of it, because if that part becomes hinky, but at card level, that's simple.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's part of the idea with generic decks as well. So we've got the four, we're putting out 4 games initially, with it within the first 2 years or so. And then, but before that, we're going to do generic decks, like Michael said. And so you can, I want to run a fantasy game. Okay, well, I'm going to do a fantasy deck and then some of this other stuff. And, kind of let people build their own game within what we're providing.
Sure.
Because I was thinking that with the LARP, if you had like the designer app, and then you had the player app.
Yep.
So with the designer app, you would set it up, you would store it in the cloud.
Yep.
And then, like, if you wanted different locations, like you were saying, there's a safe zone where you have to go to replenish it. So you could go to that location, go, right, this is that location.
GPS tag.
Sure.
Yep.
And then other people can go and play it. So I think you could do it quite well. I like the idea of doing it in the cloud because once you've got it set up, you could have those audio cues and all of that done by a writer, not someone who needs to do the mechanics.
Yep.
And also, where you've got like all the one-on-one combat, the cloud is knowing that the vampires are winning over werewolves or something like that. So I think it's quite interesting. You could scale it quite big.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That'd be very interesting. You go to the font to get your Ether, and once you're at the font, the GPS tagging, you get your new card. It just messages you.
Yep.
Or better yet, you walk into a trap. A tone goes off through the app, and now you know that you automatically fill the challenge.
Yep. It was something that we were in the technology scores, and we've mentioned it, we talked about it a couple times. We were working with a company who, unfortunately, a lot of the software and the hardware we use for LARPing, because LARP there isn't a lot of money behind the LARP.
There's not a lot of acknowledged money.
There's not a lot of acknowledged money behind LARP. We oftentimes are finding ourselves reappropriating other people's technologies and tools to try and use it for LARP. The company we were working with, Movable Code, was looking to make LARP-specific software and equipment, but unfortunately, there wasn't enough funding on it to continue the project.
They went out of business last
Have
year.
you got someone developing that already?
Not yet.
Because I think we'd be interested to.
I would love to talk.
Because I think there are other markets for it that once you develop, because we get
Yes.
stuff in education and simulation and all of that.
Yeah.
And so once you've got that, and I like the fact that it's easy mechanic, it's not lots of fucking around.
It's super.
There's no reason for mechanics to be difficult. I understand that there are people who love the simulation.
I mean, some people look at number crunch,
Yeah.
certainly, but.
Some people really get into it.
Yeah, and there's, they can just play champions at that point.
It's not easy to
Exactly.
because you can't interact with people and they're,
Yeah.
And like to your point about immersion, so we've been looking at wearables and stuff like that, and you could also do like gestures.
Yep.
So you don't have to keep looking down. And like with Bluetooth headsets and so you get a phone call that says the result is conflict or you're now such and such.
Yeah, I could see some sort of,
Yeah, like
some sort of real time, just like as we get into.
So you can
kind
get
of-
the vibration with it.
Yeah, or just like we get, we're gonna get into a fight, I've got it, it comes up, it sees that Michael is 2 feet from me, do I want to fight, go. Like it's, we could Tron all the way to,
And the potential is without a there for it.
Yeah. I think this is an important first step, though, or something like this, where we can move in between. It also allows, because it moves back and forth, it allows the same game to be both tabletop and live action. So we're live action, we're here, we're doing this thing, we're playing Ex Arcana, and so I want to go off into an airship. Well, I'm at a con game, I can't prop for an airship, but we can sit down at the table and we can turn it into narration, just like that.
That is very versatile. I like that.
And we don't have to change anything.
No, I like that.
And in the other way around, we're playing a tabletop, we're gonna get into a fight. Let's take this outside. And
Well, I
just take it outside.
really like that aspect of it, like all the things that you can't biz rep, basically.
Yeah.
All of the things that just completely break physical immersion. Like, this is a LARP about being in LA. Cool, okay. We go out and we can walk around the streets and we can just do this LARP. And then, okay, well, we're gonna enter the spirit realm. Now it's a tabletop.
Yeah,
Yep, now we switch over to tabletop, or
and we don't lose in the
We-
step.
Yeah, I like that.
we want to do a 500-person large-scale battle. We can switch that into tabletop.
Right,
We don't have to set up 500 mannequins.
right.
So, there is nothing else.
That's it, yeah.
I think we have.
We're bad at filling 2 hours, but I hope you guys don't mind.
It was good. I think the deck maker aspect, just the ability to $30. Here's the editor pack or whatever. Make your own
Here's how
cards.
you customize your own.
And
Yeah.
if it's in a manner where, like you said, and now it's in the cloud.
Yep.
If now suddenly everyone has that game, if they wanted to play it, there's probably some weirdness with intellectual property there. I don't know, but I want to make a Dresden Files LARP using this system. Bam! I've made it basic Dresden Files. It's in there. Anyone can pull it up. Oh, cool! Hey, Dresden Files. We can do that now. Or
even
We
with
Are
that,
Dogs, the LARP.
even with that, a lot of, a vast majority of the powers are already going to be there.
Right.
It's when you get to the point of We Are Dogs alert, where you have to make your own,
Extremely customized.
extremely
Yeah.
customized. That's when you're not dealing with an IP to begin with, and you can go, here's We Are
Sure.
Dogs.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is now in the cloud for
There
access.
is certainly, if I wanted to play a Dresden game, I would probably, I'd pull the generic deck, I'd pull some from Ex Arcana, I'd probably pull a bunch from Dreamless, and I could make my own Dresden game out of that. You know, if I wanted to play, I want to play
Star Wars.
Dark Age, I was thinking, I want to play Dark Ages Vampire, I'm going to pull the generic deck, the Dark Ages deck, and, the Undead deck. And I can pull those together.
And then I'll use this power and this power, but not this power and this power, and we'll allow these.
GMs will be able to just not publish is the wrong word, but, put up, here's a full list of the approved cards for this game. And then you can just build your deck out of that, you build your character with that. That's ta-da.
Maybe having a GM app too, like where the GM
Yes.
can kind of decide which cards are available, so that way nobody's.
What I'd love to be able to do is have the GM go, we are playing here at this time, sets it by GPS. If you would
Send out
like,
invitation to
sends out
everybody.
an invitation. If you would like to join this game, you click join, here's what's an approved card set, and then it sends it over to the GM who goes, dun, 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 okay, this is what I got in my game.
Mm.
If it does manage to get to that level, I think that has massive potential.
So too.
If you've got the app, hey, guess what? You can attend this LARP.
Yeah,
Yes,
Hey, you just got a notification. LARP's happening in an hour if you want to go.
which would be great because we have such problems organizing and getting Google calendars and all this stuff that it's just
Yeah.
so difficult to know what's out there.
if you get a wonky idea for a LARP you want to run at a convention, instead of doing a LARP convention where it's this is going on at this time, and this is going on at this time, and this is going on at this time, you could go, I'm now running My Little Pony LARP, let's go.
Right.
Happening in 30 minutes.
It's happening in 30 minutes, happening in 5 hours, whatever. That way you are now using hotel rooms and locations instead of,
I was reading this quite easy. I can't remember. I was reading something about this Japanese game that people, like random people that were playing the game, would meet in different places, and the sensor would detect. Say like they were going to meet in a coffee shop or something. So the example I read was the woman when, I'm going to be in a coffee shop, and then the guy turned up, and she spotted him, but she was too shy to go over and say hello or anything. So someone's already been looking at this idea of players in that world trying to get together in a real space.
Oh, yeah. I mean, pervasive games is what
Yeah.
it's called. And there's a great book, if you haven't read it, it's totally like required material into this stuff.
Pervasive gaming is surprisingly simple and surprisingly complicated at the same time.
But there's like a recent one called Shadow Cities, where it's like, I think it's like mage battles or whatever, but you're like in the physical city and you go to places and you can like, oh, there's somebody 2 blocks away, okay, I attack them or whatever, you know, and so it's all through the phone. So there's a lot of potential with that. The hard part is integrating the role play aspect with it, because it becomes basically, you know, assassin, like,
Yeah,
it's basically
yeah.
sort of killing each other.
That's what
Or-
Google has a game, Ingress, that's very similar, but it is very much just it's a flags.
It's too
ARG.
fucking.
It is an ARG, but it's a
Geocaching combat game.
no, hold the, you play it in Halo, you have to
King
hold the
of Hell.
location, King of Hell, yeah, it's a game of thing. It's like that, so, you know, my team shows up to the park, your team shows up to the park, we battle to see who gets, you know.
Who gets control of the park.
Which sounds like super fun, but a different game.
But this idea of being able to, you know, get an alert on my phone to know that there's a LARP going to be starting, if I show up at this time, and I can participate in it. And yeah, I have the system built into the app, but it's a social thing, not just, you know, I'm playing, you know, just passively or whatever. I think that has a lot of real potential, because one of them, we're going to talk about this later, but one of the main issues that LARPers have is just insular, being so insular,
Yes.
and not knowing what's happening. There could be a LARP going on down the block, and you would never know if you're not part of that community.
Correct.
So that's I really like that idea.
The part about ensuring the role play, I have not to date come up with an app or system that replaces storytellers.
Or just trained players that know what they're doing.
Yeah, or just the social contract culture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, it's social contract and play culture, I mean, knowing, you know, what's expected and having that be established.
Thank you very much for coming into this.
We'll see some of you in 40 minutes.